What is going on, everyone? It is Luca here, back with another video. And in today's video, I wanted to talk about the Raptors and get into the rest of their season and then look ahead to the future outlook of this team. Of course, it's been a couple of rough seasons for the Raptors. They're about to miss the postseason for the third straight season, but for the first time in what feels like a while, there is some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm personally excited. A lot more excited than I have been in a while, but where this team is headed, they got the pieces in place, and they are now pretty much set up to try and be competitive for the next season, for 2025, 2026. And I think when you look at this team, that is the feeling that next season at this time, hopefully we're having a much different conversation, and the Raptors are pushing for something as opposed to talking about their tankathon odds. But the Raptors, this has been a rebuild, sped it up a bit with that Brandon Ingram trade, and this is a team that they do have some optimism going forward when you just look at where this team is headed and what they're working with. So before we get into it, do me a solid, guys, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button for more Raptors content just like this. Before we look ahead, the Raptors, they got to get through the rest of this season. And when you look at the Raptors, I mean, it's clear as day at this point. Raptors GM Bobby Webster said it, like, their sights are set on the draft, and rightfully so. Like, this team, given how many injuries they're dealing with right now, like BI, he's not expected to be back for at least a month. Pirtle is still sidelined at the time of this recording. The Raptors, it makes no sense for them to push for the play-in. They got to try to be as bad as they can for this final 27-game stretch. They got to put themselves in the best position for the draft lottery. And right now, the Raptors have the 5th worst record in the NBA. And if the season ended today, they would have a 42.1% chance of getting to the top 4 and a 10.5% chance of landing the number 1 overall pick. So if you look at the tankathon and the reverse standings, the Raptors, they do have some cushion when you look at them, the Sixers, and the Nets, who are right behind the Raptors. But then if the Raptors want to try to move on up in the reverse standings, it's going to be pretty difficult because they're 2.5 back of the Hornets in the reverse standings. And the Hornets, they're going to be bad the rest of the way. And then they're 3.5 back of the Jazz for the 3rd worst record in the reverse standings. So I think if I had to bet on this, like, the Raptors remaining in that 5th worst slot, I think, is their most realistic outcome. Like, of course, they can move on up, and they could certainly fall if they win some games, and we'll get to the remaining schedule in just a second here. But I think if the Raptors play their cards right, they should remain with the 5th worst record, and then in hindsight, it should give you the 5th pick in the draft if the draft lottery doesn't screw you in any way. So I think, all things considered, you can still end up getting a really good pick with that number 5. Ideally, I'd love to get into the top 3, but again, if you finish with the 5th worst record, I just gave you the percentages, there is a chance you could move into that top 4, top 3, and a chance you could even win the whole thing. We've seen teams jump before in the past. So I think for the Raptors' sake, stay where you're at, worst case, and then if the Raptors could potentially get past Charlotte, I think that would be huge. But the only issue with that is, if you look at the Raptors' upcoming schedule, what I'm worried about is the end of their schedule, because coming out of this All-Star break, they're going to be taking on some playoff-esque teams. When you look at the Heat, Suns, Celtics, Pacers, Magic. So 6 of their next 7 are against teams like that. But then in their last part of the season, I think it's their final 19, like, they're going to be playing a bunch of bad teams, like teams who are going to be a part of that race for the bottom. They got the Wizards 3 times. They got the Jazz a couple of times. They got the Nets a few more times, the Blazers, the 76ers, who could be a part of that tankathon, the Hornets. So it's going to be tough, especially if we're going to see Brandon Ingram at some point, and I think we will see Ingram for at least like 5 games, I would say, would be safe. Like, I'd be shocked if we don't see Brandon Ingram at all and the Raptors just sit him out. I think they would want to see how he looks with this group a little bit before going to next season. But basically, Raptors got to do whatever they can to bottom out here. Like, there's no use to win these games. They got to strategically sit guys if it comes to that. They got to play the young guys a ton. Unfortunately, got the news of Ulrich Chomchi, which sucks because We were about to see a lot of Chomchi down the stretch, but you got to play the two-way guys. You got to play the rookies. You really just got to let them do their thing. And as much as, it's going to be a little bit of a painful stretch here if you're a fan, you just got to remind yourself, like, this is probably going to be the last time we're entertaining Tank being bad, hopefully for a while. Because if the Raptors do this right, they get a top pick, you add that to the core, like, they're going to be in a good spot for next season. This is basically the group that we're going to have next season. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is RJ Barrett, because the Raptors are going to get really close to that tax, and they probably are going to be a tax team when they start next season. And for them not to be penalized, they basically got to get out of the tax before the end of next season. So theoretically, they would have the trade deadline next season to potentially get under that tax, but they're going to be an expensive team. And obviously, if you move a guy like RJ, it makes things smooth a little bit. You can comfortably operate. But if you have RJ, like, things are going to get really, really tight, especially when it comes down to what pick the Raptors are going to get. Obviously, if you get the first pick, that's going to cost a lot more than if you get the number 5 or number 6 pick. So this is basically the group. Like, the Raptors are going to be very thin with what they work with. And, like, I think because they have a little bit of time and they have next season, like, the NBA trade deadline is basically the new offseason. I could see a situation where the Raptors run this group with Ingram next season, see how it works out with RJ, and then maybe we see another big move at next season's trade deadline, or it could even come sooner, around draft day or even the summer. But I think for right now, the Raptors want to see what this group can give them. Obviously, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl. But then again, the draft can change things, because if the Raptors end up getting a solid pick and one of those guys who could replace RJ Barrett in the starting lineup, then they're going to have some big decisions to make. But in essence, like, barring another big trade, like, this is going to be the group with that pick. And then you're looking at a bench of Jamal Shed, who's going to be entering year 2. Grady Dick's going to go back to that bench role. Jacoby Walter. You're going to have Abaji. You're going to have Mobile. Like, the Raptors, they got to figure out what they want to do with that backup big spot. Like, do you want to roll Mobo as kind of that small ball backup? We've seen him start with Jakob Poeltl out. They got Orlando Robinson as really their only true big behind Poeltl right now. And it's going to be tough for them to make an upgrade other than the draft because of what they're working with financially. So that's going to be a big question. But overall, like, this team, like, going into next season, if BI's healthy and he plays up to his standard, like, I think at the very least, like, this is going to be a playing team with a potential even getting to that top 6 if they end up getting a very good pick in the draft. Like, I don't think it's crazy to think that this Raptors team can have, like, a Detroit Pistons type leap next season. Like, look at the Pistons. They're right now in a top 6 spot. Did anybody have that? Like, I had the Pistons making the play-in. I did not have them in that top 6. So, like, that bottom of the East is very vulnerable. It's very open. Like, outside of the top 5, there's a lot of question marks about, like, those teams and where they're headed. So I think there's an opportunity for a team to, make a big jump next season. And just seeing what the Pistons have done, like, I can see the Raptors, if things go well, kind of make that similar type jump. But of course, like, for them, they got to get through the rest of the season, do it right, get a top pick, and then they got to make a decision of, like, what we're doing here. Like, are we going to get rid of RJ? Is there a world where we can make this work? So I think those are kind of like the big looming questions. And then come next season, I think this team is going to take the tank expectations off and kind of like the rebuild expectations off, and they're going to go for it. Like, I expect the Raptors to be far more competitive next season. Like I said, this time next season, when I'm making a video on this team, I fully expect to say, like, the Raptors, they have 27 games left and they're trying to push for the play-in or push for the playoffs. Like, I doubt it's going to end up being another lost season just with how they're positioned now. And Ingram, like, he's been saying all the right things. Like, the Raptors have never had a player of his caliber willingly choose Toronto. So I think that's exciting. Like, he wants to be here. He's a talented player. He's an all-star. He wants to get back to all-star status. So you got that to look forward to. Yeah, guys, all in all, I think the Raptors, they got some good building blocks, and we'll see how it all comes together. This future of the team, it's promising. It's a lot more promising when compared to previous seasons. So anyways, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, plus ring the bell for more. That is it for me. It's Luke signing off. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you all again in the next one.